let's start today with a little bit of a story. And the story comes from the president, Trump. He told a story at an event, and while you're listening to it, you might think, that's interesting, and not exactly get why I'm bringing this to you. But just listen, and then I'll tell you why this story should scare us. Here we go.
We appreciate you doing an amazing job. They're building plants already, and they're building plants, and they have already their permits. And I have to brag just for a second, because when I first heard about AI, it's not my thing. Although my uncle was at MIT, one of the great professors, 51 years, whatever. He was the longest serving professor in the history of MIT, 3 degrees in nuclear, chemical, and math. That's a smart man. Kaczynski was one of his students. Do you know who Kaczynski was? There's very little difference between a madman and a genius. But Kaczynski, I said, what kind of a student was he, Uncle John, Dr. John Trump? He said, what kind of a student? And then he said, seriously good. He said he'd go around correcting everybody, but it didn't work out too well for him. Didn't work out too well, but it's interesting in life. But I will say this, that we have the
Okay, so apparently his uncle, who, did he say taught or majored or got a doctorate or something in math, what was it? Nuclear and chemical, taught Ted Kaczynski, otherwise known as the Unabomber. So that's an interesting story. That's weird. We never heard that before. Your uncle taught the Unabomber. Now, there's a couple problems with the story, though. First is that Ted Kaczynski did not go to MIT. So how his uncle would have taught him, we don't know. But then you think, I don't know, maybe. You never know. Maybe Uncle John, something he taught him they sat next to a bar with each other. But you'll notice part of Trump's story is that Trump asked Uncle Dr. John, notorious in his chemical knowledge, about what Uncle John thought about Ted Kaczynski being the Unabomber. Right? That was a part of the story. And he went, it's interesting because he was a really good student. Otherwise, why would Trump have asked about a random student named Kaczynski before we knew he was the Unabomber? But Uncle John died many, many years before we knew Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber. So they couldn't have had that conversation, both because Kaczynski didn't go to MIT and because Uncle John died before we even knew who Kaczynski was. From the late 1970s to the mid-1990s, Kaczynski sent several mail bombs to people whose work he believed was destroying the environment, etc., etc. You know that story. But Kaczynski was not identified as the Unabomber until the mid-1990s, about a decade after Trump's uncle died. So maybe it is the case, it probably is, that Uncle John was a genius. But his nephew...
of MIT,
I don't know about his nephew. Now, before showing you a clip that should scare you more and has more consequences than that one, having to do with Trump's inability to understand time, because you're thinking that, well, that was a long time ago. Maybe he thought of a different story about a different Uncle John who taught Kaczynski. You never know. I want to just zero back in on this because we can't leave this clip in the ash bin of history. We got to come back to it. And since he brought up his uncle, MIT, because MIT, let's hear about MIT.
And it must be because of MIT, my relationship to MIT.
Weirdest sentence beginner ever. Must be because MIT. While we're watching this, please do click the subscribe button if you appreciate the show. We have a lot more to go through in this segment and then a ton ahead of us in the show. And then if you want to become a member, you can do it by clicking the join button right next to the subscribe button on YouTube.
And it must be because of MIT, my relationship to MIT. Very smart. He goes, I say, what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there. By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark. I watched some guys justifying it today. Well, they weren't really that angry. They bit off the young lady's leg because of the fact that they were not hungry, but they misunderstood who she was. These people are crazy. He said there's no problem with sharks. They just didn't really understand a young woman swimming now who really got decimated, and other people too, a lot of shark attacks. So I said, so there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards, or here. Do I get electrocuted? If the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking. Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question.
Really?
I said, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of electric current coming through that water. But you know what I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted? I'll take electrocution every single time. I'm not getting near the shark. So we're going to end that. We're going to end it for boats. We're going to end it for trucks.
I think one of the best responses to any Trump moment like that on stage ever was numerous people who responded to this by saying, listen, I want to vote for Kamala. I do. But I just don't know how to when she hasn't articulated her stance on where she stands. Electrocution or shark. I mean, how can you run a campaign and not specify that? It's just really, it's strange. So that's that. But much more consequentially, you have Trump, who is reportedly crafting a letter to fire, which wouldn't really be how the Fed is supposed to work, but he's doing all sorts of things that aren't how things are supposed to work. Fire the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, with no cause, but just because Trump disagrees with his policies and his handling of interest rates. And when asked about this, again, you watch the clip, and if you don't know one little tidbit like the Kaczynski story, then you'll go, what's the notable part? He just says, I don't know why, I don't know who appointed him, I don't know why he was appointed. But if you know who appointed Jerome Powell, you get why that's pretty mind-boggling.
To end what you've been seeing over the last couple hours.
Mr. President, Jerome Powell, do you have plans, or if you're back considering firing Jerome Powell, and what's your justification if you're thinking about this to do this?
Too late. He's always been too late, hence his nickname, Too Late. He should have cut interest rates a long time ago. Europe has cut them 10 times in a short period of time, and we cut them none.
The way that Trump redecorated the White House with more gold stuff makes it to where his hair just disappears into his chair. It's really unique.
The only time he cut him was just before the election to try and help Kamala or Biden, whoever the hell it was, because nobody really knew. Obviously, that didn't work, but he tried to cut him for the Democrats, Kamala. And how did that work out? You'll tell me. It didn't work out too well, did it? But he's I think he does a terrible job. He's costing us a lot of money, and we fight through it. It's almost, the country's become so successful that it doesn't have a big impact, but it does hurt people wanting to get a mortgage. People want to buy a house. He's a terrible Fed chair. I was surprised he was appointed. I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him, but they did. So, no, we're not.
So just the point here that Trump's trying to articulate is that it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense that Jerome Powell was appointed. Like, why was he What are you showing me, Jane? This? Huh? What's this?
As president, there are a few decisions more important than nominating leaders of integrity and good judgment to hold trusted positions in public office. And few of those trusted positions are more important than the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Accordingly, it is my pleasure and my honor to announce my nomination of Jerome Powell.
Well, it was Trump. That's such a... So, Kaczynski, 1990, says uncle died in 1980. All right, maybe his fake story, we can give him a pass. How you come up with a fake story about a conversation you never had? I don't know. Delusion, lies, who knows? But how did he even think of that, by the way? He's just watching stories about Kaczynski, his brain's like, it would be really crazy That's how it happens, probably. He's sitting around with people watching the television and something about the Unabomber comes up and he goes, that would be crazy if someone that we knew taught him. That would be, my uncle is very smart because I'm smart because he's smart because MIT, MIT, which by the way, MIT is great, awesome, very, high level institution. But the way Trump acts like because a member of his family went to a nice college or taught at a nice university that he must be a genius. This is bizarre. But he's sitting there, he's going, look, Kaczynski, that would be crazy if my uncle knew him. That'd be crazy if my uncle knew him. My uncle knew him. My uncle knew him. And then it just develops to a story. But this, how do we let him off the hook for this? I think he forgot. And I know that this is an overdone thing. And Biden had some wacky gaffes. But if Biden forgot that he appointed someone he appointed, the coverage. It would be a crisis. I think that's a fair point to make. So this could have disastrous economic consequences. One of the things that gives stability and certainty and confidence in the U.S. economy is that the Fed's monetary policy is not run by political actors and that it's supposed to be pretty independent from political actors. Of course, the president is going to select somebody, but then they have their term and it's not to be messed with. Public criticism, fine, but they're supposed to operate in a nonpartisan way. And so Trump sort of illegally trying to get rid of Jerome Powell without cause, which is there's a lot of gray area there procedurally, but there's supposed to be real cause for removing a Fed chair. And it's not supposed to be just because you don't like that they haven't lowered interest rates yet. And the only reason that he hasn't lowered interest rates yet, he was planning on it, or they were planning on it, until Trump's tariffs put inflation into a more uncertain place. But despite him denying this in that meeting, he did draft a letter to fire the Fed chair, according to the New York Times. He asked Republicans if he should send it. And I'll show you, he then denies that he drafted this letter. Let me get this pulled up. Here we go.
Lower interest rates.
That you are going to fire him? Have you drafted a letter?
I haven't drafted a letter.
So you didn't show a letter to Republican lawmakers last night?
No, I talked about the concept of fire him. I said, what do you think? Almost every one of them said I should. But I'm more conservative than they are. Lower interest.
Okay. Even though he's constantly saying, and then Chad Pergram. It's interesting that people still have the name Chad. That's just like a very manly name. That's cool that you could actually be named Chad. Because now it's like an alpha Chad, and your actual name is Chad. You ever think of that, Chad Pergram? You ever thought of it? Fox has confirmed that President Trump asked a group of House Republicans if he should fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Fox is told that the lawmakers agree he should be fired. He's going to do it, said one source. When asked when, the source replied, soon. This would immediately bring legal challenges. Probably will be halted by a lower court. And then we'll see what the Supreme Court does. But the economy will almost certainly react terribly. The stock market, and then that'll ripple into the economy, to that action. Because again, we have a certain level of stability knowing that the Fed isn't operating on the whims of Trump's political wills. Then the Bahrainian prime minister said something that in the same meeting that really caught my ear. Notice how he goes, we're agreeing to some real deals with Trump, not fake deals.
Thank you, one and all. It is indeed a great honor to be here on this fine morning to put into action the relationship that exists between our two countries. We will be discussing security issues, we'll be discussing trade and investment, which is very important. We're very happy to be announcing $17 billion worth of deals that are coming to the United States. And this is real. This isn't...
It's real money.
These aren't fake deals. These are real deals.
They don't have to borrow the money.
We don't.
These aren't fake deals. Salman, it's a little defensive. Is that in contrast to other deals that Trump has announced, perhaps? Okay, so let me take you back on that note to a little moment from a show that I really like. It's called This One. And we had a discussion about Trump's increasingly delusional proclamations about how much private business investment he has attracted into the United States. You'll watch that play out, and then I have an update for you.
We're up to...
Okay, he's about to say we're up to. I want either of you can grab your mic. What number do you think? It started at the beginning of his administration at $2 trillion. What number do you think he's going to say he's brought into the United States in business investment?
I feel like it's up to 11 trillion at this point.
Okay. Cole, do we have a guess? It gets bigger every time.
I'll go 14.
14. Okay, let's listen. Again, it started at 2 and it was at 5 on his Saudi Arabia UAE Qatar trip. Let's see where it got to.
That nobody's ever believed. We're up to close to $15 trillion. Other administrations, they wouldn't do that.
Okay, so it was a couple days ago. It was, what did he say, 15? Then yesterday.
And we're at a little bit less than 6 months, but really we're probably at 3 months because it took me a little time to get started, right? So in 3.5, 4 months, let's say, we have about $16 trillion. There's never been.
And then I saw, and I don't have this clip, but I saw somewhere that he had, maybe I'm misremembering this, but he at least got up to 16, which remember, our entire economy's GDP is like 27 something trillion. So he's, by the end, at this rate, by the end of his presidency, we're going to be like 4 times the size of the U.S. economy. We're going to 4x the U.S. economy, despite our last quarter of GDP growth being a contraction. We're going to soon 4x the U.S. economy in an unprecedented way. It's unbelievable.
Give me a joke.
Give me a joke. But some people are saying he's lying. After that Fed chair thing, maybe he just has no idea. Maybe somebody tells him and he just ups it every time accidentally. He has no idea what he's saying. Share your thoughts in the comments.